Legislative coverage on SDPB is supported by the South Dakota Bar Foundation, SDN Communications, Missouri River Energy Services, Wrench Law, and your membership in the Friends of SDPB. Thank you.
This is a production of SDPB.
Legislators have less than a week to get their bills from one chamber to the next. From SDPB, today is Wednesday, February 19th, and this is In the Moment. Coming up this hour, lawmakers return from a long weekend to face the deadline of crossover day. This legislative session brought many new faces to Pierre. We're going to check in with legislative leaders about how their caucuses plan to push priorities over the halfway mark to becoming law. This hour, we'll hear from Senator Jim Melhoff, Representative Marty Overweg, Senator Liz Larson, and Representative Aaron Healy. Plus, we kick off the hour with SDPB reporters at the Capitol Now. Lee Strubinger and CJ King will join us. We're broadcasting today from SDPB's Kirby Family Studio in Pierre. I'm Lori Walsh. You're in the moment. News is first.
A man in prison joins a theater group. An intelligent robot shipwrecks on a deserted island, and a girl with magic tries to find her place in Oz. The Oscars are fast approaching, and we're listening back to some of our conversations with the actors and creators behind this year's Oscar nominees. We also discuss the controversy that may derail the chances of one Best Picture nominee. That's next time on 1A.
Listen Wednesday morning at 10 Central, 9 Mountain on SDPB.
Program funding by Cody Yellowstone, a place that's still wild, where you can roam the unknown, live the cowboy life, earn the patina, and see the world through mud-colored glasses. Cody Yellowstone, wild forever.
I'm Carl Gerke, and this evening on Jazz Nightly, we'll hear the latest from a few jazz greats who first emerged in the 1970s, including saxophonist T.K. Blue, drummer Peter Erskine, guitarist Mike Stern, and tenor saxophonist Scott Hamilton. Plus, we'll hear saxophonist David Murray, who came up through the free jazz scene of the 1970s. Today is his 70th birthday. It all begins at 8 Central, 7 Mountain.
Program funding is provided by the Adams Museum and Days of 76 Museum in Deadwood. Open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. Closed Sundays and Mondays. More at deadwoodhistory.com.
Welcome to In the Moment State House. I'm Lori Walsh. Legislators are gathered in Pierre for the 100th legislative session. Lee Strubinger is SDPB's politics and public policy reporter, and he is seated in the SDN Communications studio in Pierre for an update. Lee Strubinger, welcome back to In the Moment. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
You've had a busy morning. Tell me a little bit about some of the stories that you're following. Where do you want to begin?
Yeah, so one of the things I was following was really a bill that's been in discussion since last year. I say bill, I should say idea. There were two bills that were heard in Senate Judiciary Tuesday morning that received kind of the same hearing. They were very, very similar in nature, and one had already passed the House, and the Senate was having a hearing on its bill. So rather than have two separate hearings for efficiency in a tight, soon to be, lots of deadlines heading our way legislative session, they had a kind of singular dual bill hearing, if you will. And it relates to the ability of people to access certain content on the internet that might be deemed more for adults, think internet pornography and stuff like that, with the idea really being to prevent or help reduce the ability of minors to be able to access that content. And one of the kind of prevailing ideas that's out there right now is something that has actually been argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a bill that Texas brought, which basically says that any internet platforms that have more than 33 1/3% of its content has to set up a verification system to help verify that somebody accessing the content is 18 years of age.
All right, so this is There are different ideas on how to go about this, and I'm assuming that that is about the constitutionality, like how close do we get to Texas law, because that's already being argued in front of the Supreme Court. What's the other angle to come at this with?
Yeah, so if we step back to what lawmakers kind of decided in the interim period between last session and this session, they decided to go with a bill that was remarkably similar to Texas's, which was basically that 33.33% content, you need to have that age verification. The person who originally brought this bill idea last session is Sioux Falls Republican Representative Bethany Soy. She brought a remarkably similar bill again this year. This is actually an idea she brought during the interim, but it wasn't particularly decided on. And here's where like the kind of key differences between the two bills are. In Soy's bill, the bill that just passed out of Senate Judiciary, it's already gone through the House process, so this is kind of its next step towards the governor's desk. It's basically any website which in the regular course of the website's trade or business makes available material that is harmful to minors. What the Senate Judiciary Committee just set on the table, what they decided not to go forward with, was basically a similar covered platform which has a substantial portion of material that is harmful to minors. So again, that would be that 33.33. Where the questions really kind of exist is sort of what will or won't be allowable after the United States Supreme Court decision. And then there's also the question of what does actually constitute a platform that has material available that would be harmful to minors. Would that be something like X or Twitter, where there are kind of pornographic images associated with certain what do you want to call them, accounts, or a website that might have a particular image? At what threshold will this type of law, and will these platforms be susceptible to a kind of lawsuit ahead of them? And that's kind of the unanswered question there.
Right. Also, I mean, sex education or access to abortion, which might be illegal in South Dakota but not illegal in another state. Does that affect that? I mean, harmful to minors seems, when we're talking internet porn, it seems to make sense. When we're talking, quote, harmful to minors, then all sorts of other things are part of that. Do you see a sense of the lawmakers trying to define very clearly or narrowly what harmful to minors means and who gets to decide?
Right, and this is always like what happens with free speech questions, right? There's a lot of gray area and it's really messy. Backers of this particular idea, especially the one for the House bill that Representative Soy is bringing, they point to the Miller test, which is basically something is not deemed pornographic if it has like literary or scientific merit along those lines. Like the example that was brought up in committee is like, what if Netflix has the movie Titanic and there's some nudity within the movie The Titanic? Proponents of this particular measure say that wouldn't fall under this particular law because it would be deemed to have like literary and artistic merit.
Yeah. Where does the Attorney General, Jack Lee, he will want a bill that he can defend? Is he weighing in on either one of these ideas?
He was a proponent for both of the bills as they were up for that particular hearing.
All right. Anything else you've got your eye focused on here going forward to Crossover Day, Lee?
Again, I think a lot of this legislative session comes down to whether or not authorization for the men's prison actually happens. Yeah. Because it's a House bill, the House State Affairs Committee has sent that to House Appropriations. The House Appropriations is going to have to take a little bit of a closer look at it because a lot of lawmakers on the State Affairs Committee want them to figure out how is the state going to pay to operate this particular facility going forward. They found out during the State Affairs meeting that it would cost about $20 million more annually to operate. And I think they're going to try and dive into why that particular number exists and then send it to the full House for a vote. They're going to need to get 2/3 majority in the House to authorize the sort of construction of that particular facility. That's a really big looming question right now in the House chamber.
Lee Sterbinger is SDPB's Politics and Public Policy Reporter. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lori.
Next, we are joined by SDPB's CJ Keene, also joining us from SDN Communications Studio in Pierre with an update on some stories he's been following. CJ Keene, welcome to In the Moment. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Lori.
What do you have your eye on this week as we head into crossover day particularly?
So a major thing this week was some marijuana legislation that was promptly killed in the House Health and Human Services Committee. House Bill 1101 effectively would have gutted the state's medical marijuana program, and it only would have kept pot in the prescription drug monitoring program, but in essence would put cannabis completely back on the black market if it were to have passed. The proponent is Representative Travis Ismay of Newell, who wrongly claimed that it is the state's current model that has created a fully legal system. Now, he did have another bill which did pass out of committee that had suggested maybe adding more guardrails into the pot program would have potentially fixed that, including most notably a prescription card system. That has passed out of committee, and I'll definitely be following up on that. But opponents say voters generally know what they voted for, and especially pointing to the statistical difference between the full legalization vote and the just purely medicinal cannabis vote. It is pretty hard to argue considering there's a 20% gap and about 70% of voters approved of a medicinal marijuana program. They're also arguing that they're creating more felons if we were to have a system where medicinal marijuana was completely illegalized or criminalized once again. And that's especially a hot button issue with 90% of the proposed prison cells in the new state prison, which has been a huge discussion point here in Pierre, already filled upon completion of a near $1 billion facility.
So, CJ, recreational marijuana was defeated. To your point, to reiterate what you just said, medicinal marijuana was approved previously by voters. Why this legislation at all? Was there a problem that perhaps needs to be adjusted, or that the legislation needs to be adjusted? Were there issues on the table, or is this just a relitigation of the fact that some people are not happy that voters approved this? What do you think?
Well, that's part of the question. It doesn't seem like there's any specific moments here in South Dakota. A few of the proponent testifiers said it remains a gateway drug, and it was frequently their own lived experience with family members, say, who maybe had struggled with harder substances. But ultimately, a lot of the evidence was nothing particularly firm in this committee. I mean, one of the clips shown by the prime sponsor was a video of a man, and it's not even clear where this video was taken, of apparently giving marijuana to a child, and he said, this isn't what we want in South Dakota, and that was basically the basis of the attempt to relitigate this.
Yeah.
And ultimately the will of the voters won on a 7-6 vote.
Lawmakers still have concern. I'm sure it's not the last time that we will hear about that. Anything else that you're following ahead of crossover day here that you want to address?
All right, so Senate Bill 192 is something that I've been following, which is part of this new Democratic push for some reforms in the judicial system. It was brought by Assistant Minority Leader Senator Jamie Smith just to do something very simple in renaming the Department of Corrections. That was wholly supported in the South Dakota Senate, and it was supported in a bipartisan manner with Senator Carl Perry, who is the Republican Assistant Majority Leader, saying that South Dakota needs to create a better mousetrap if we're going to be building this near $1 billion prison. Ultimately, that passed and is going to the House, and I'll be sure to follow that.
All right, CJ Keene, thank you so much for stopping by.
Happy to do it.
Here's what's coming up next on In the Moment. We are going to hear a lot about that prison throughout the hour. We'll take a break. We'll come back with Republican leaders of the Senate and the House. And then later in the hour, you'll hear from Senator Liz Larson and Representative Aaron Healy, who are representing the minority party, the Democrats, and they will talk more about Senator Jamie Smith's proposal to have the language change and the sort of a reframing of how we refer to corrections and the prison in South Dakota. This is In the Moment State House on SDPB.
We 5 children would grab the cardboard tubes and run around bopping each other on the head for kicks. The youngest one didn't have a lot of words yet, but started yelling the word "Barcha, Barcha" when she saw one.
and I just kind of wondered, was that just a slang in the area or exactly where it came from?
Join us this week on Away with Words.
Listen Sunday morning at 9 Central, 8 Mountain on SDPB.
Program funding by Arts South Dakota, encouraging the development of artistic talent and appreciation in all South Dakotans, advancing the arts through education, service, and advocacy. More at artsouthdakota.org.
SDPB has education resources for parents and teachers. Go to sdpb.org/learn. Whether you're getting a child ready for kindergarten or need dissection videos for middle schoolers, we have media and lesson plans for learners of all ages. That's sdpb.org/learn.
Program funding is provided by Geo Fun Trek Tours, where they use art and science to reveal and illuminate the heart and soul of the Black Hills and Badlands of South Dakota. Learn more at geofuntrek.com. Politics and Public Policy reporting is supported by the Center for Western Studies at Augustana University.
Welcome to In the Moment State House. I'm Lori Walsh. We are headed to Crossover Day in the state legislature. Legislators have less than a week to shepherd bills from one chamber to the other, and that calls for strategic planning and sometimes persuasive debate. So this hour, we are checking in with legislative leaders for a look at their priorities. Up first, Republican leadership. Joining me now from SDPB's SDN Communications Studio, we have Senate Majority Leader Jim Melhoff and House Assistant Majority Leader Marty Overweg. Senator Melhoff, welcome back to In the Moment. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Nice to talk to you, Lori.
Representative Overweg, welcome as well.
Well, thank you. This has kind of been on my bucket list, as you know, so I'm pretty excited to be here, Lori.
I hope it's the first of many conversations that we have. Right. And let's start with some of the successes that you gentlemen feel in this legislative session. It's the 100th legislative session. We've had a historic changeover in the governor's office in the middle of session, and also a whole lot on your plates from a legislative standpoint. Senator Melhoff, let's begin with you. What do you think some of the highlights or successes have been so far?
Well, I would put down as a success is the transition from early in the session when we started off with Lieutenant Governor Roden. Then we went to our second presiding officer in President Pro Tem Senator Chris Carr, and we are now on our third with Lieutenant Governor Tony Van Huysen. And I think as complicated as you think that might have been, and behind the scenes it kind of was at times, but I think we moved that process very, very smoothly and really didn't lose any momentum. Yeah. So that was a big success.
Yeah. Representative Overweg, what comes to mind for you from some of the early successes, especially with so many new people, new legislators representing their communities from across the state?
Yeah, I think it's really early to say we have these great successes. I mean, we got some bills through the House floor, bills that are important to me, 1052. They're sitting over the Senate side. With all the new people, we're moving bills very quickly. This week, for the first time, we're going to have a full slate. We have all the legislators. We lost Lieutenant Governor Van Huysen. We lost off of Vice Chair of Appropriations, and the transition's been good. And so, yeah, we've got some successes, but to say we're there yet, no, we got a lot of work to do yet.
There's a lot to be done. Representative Overweg, what are some of the big conversations that you want listeners and viewers of this program to understand are still very much on the table and in play this session?
Well, it'd be impossible to say anything except the prison. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it all goes back to funding. We have to somehow figure out a way to put a budget together, and we will. It's just, in what form it's going to come in, and so the prison is a big thing out there. We have a lot legislators, a lot of groups that are, you know, if the prison doesn't get passed, there's going to be around $182 million of appropriation one-time money there. So it could get a little bit hairy at the end, but like I said, we always get our job done, and I promise you we will again this year.
What are some of your priorities for the prison conversation?
Well, I just simply want someone to sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper and show me how my grandchildren are going to pay for funding and running this new prison in the years to come. And I've not had anyone sit down and do that with me yet, so I'm still waiting.
Senator Melhoff, talk about the prison and some of the themes that you have heard come up in the debate over it. Do you share Representative Overweg's concerns?
Well, I think I have concerns, but they're probably opposite of what my good friend Representative Overweg is concerned with. My concern is that we'll dither on this project that's been underway for the last 3 years, and instead of it costing us $825 million, we'll finally get underway, and it'll come at a price tag of upwards of $1 billion.
What do you think some of those solutions might be? We've heard everything from, you know, concerns about the location and having to, you know, add utilities and roads. We've heard safety concerns. What are some of the sticking points for you?
Well, anytime you try to do something like that, place a prison, site it. We had one built in Pierre in the 90s. The women's prison was located here, and we had a lot of those very same discussions. Of course, the prison is now built here and has been functioning for, you know, close to 30 years. And, you know, they're good neighbors. So I get it when there's something like that. The neighbors don't like it, and they'll bring whatever issues they can to try to force it to another location. But we did have a DLR study that looked at it, and this was the recommendation. And even the opponents and the proponents that we sat into, both sides recommended a 1,500-bed facility, which is what's being proposed by the Department of Corrections. Yeah. And I think it's at our peril if we stop and try to take another angle at it, and it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money if we do that.
Leader Melhoff, do you have an answer, for lack of a better word, maybe a response to Representative Overweg's concerns about, you know, has it been put on paper in a way that people can understand how future generations will pay for and run this facility?
Well, I would say that regardless of what we do, future generations are going to have to pay. If you're going to have statutory criminal framework in place where you incarcerate a lot of people, you have to pay for it, and you have to house them humanely and respect their human rights. I mean, obviously it's a punishment situation, but there are some minimums that you have to meet, and I don't think we're meeting them with our current physical plan.
It's also a rehabilitation situation, which we have heard some conversations about as well. Representative Overweg, what are your thoughts about, you know, rehabilitation and creating a facility that is modern and meets the modern needs of incarceration in a way that the current facility simply is not doing?
Well, yeah, it would be great. You know, if we had all the money in the world, it would be great, because I mean, most of these prisoners are going to come out and they're going to live amongst us, right? So I mean, we want them to have a job. We want them to, you know, be able to pay for some stuff. You know, it makes it easier for them. I'm having a real hard time with this ear mug. But listen here, 320 acres of prime farm ground. I mean, do we really need that to rehabilitate? I mean, are we going to be teaching them how to drive truck? I guess how to farm? I don't know. There's so many things. You know, we start with $44 million this year in ongoing funds to fund the state. I mean, SDBB is one of them that is facing big cuts. And, you know, they're telling us in 2029 it's going to be an additional $21.5 million to run the new prison over the other. So I've been around a few years, and I know that's probably going to be closer to 30. You know, we got the one stops, another 6 million, and then pretty soon you just start doing your math in your head, and how do we run the state without raising taxes? And I'm a Republican, and I don't raise taxes. I want to cut spending and wasteful spending.
Yeah.
So there's just a big conversation going on, but like I said, it doesn't always mean I'm right, but we're going to have the conversation.
Let's talk about cutting spending a little bit, because are you finding areas that there is waste that you would like to target, maybe even that weren't identified in the governor's budget at the beginning of the session? Representative Overweg, we'll start with you with that.
Yeah, I believe the one-stop building was a huge waste. I mean, without legislation approval, the state stepped into a 30-year lease on a building that's going to cost us $30 million or $300 million over the next 30 years. They went out and purchased $11 million worth of brand new furniture to put in this building. They're moving in as we speak, and they have not got approval from us yet. You know, instead of us owning our own building, we just didn't look at anything. So yeah, I believe that's a waste. I believe it's a waste all day long. And of course, we're back to the prison, but those two things are such huge issues, and they're going to just handcuff our children, our grandchildren for years to come.
Yeah. Senator Melhoff, thoughts on One Stop and how some of that funding came through? Help people understand the process of this. How come legislators were not aware of the lease that was signed? How does that work?
Well, I wouldn't say we weren't aware of it. I mean, it was that we weren't aware of it prior to the signing taking place. But, you know, as a District 24 legislator living here in Pierre, I'm concerned with the outsourcing the state government. There just seems to be a move to allow everybody to live wherever they're at and work remotely or office in other communities rather than come to Pierre, where we make policy and where we direct the workings of state government. And I think the One Stop Center is just a symptom of that, and frankly will probably accelerate that process. And I don't think it's efficient to have people working remotely.
All right. So tell me some other topics you want to cover today, other areas that you see are really important to discuss before crossover day, and might even see debates late into the afternoon or early evening that day. Senator Melhoff?
Yeah, well, for me and for the other committee chairs, we're trying to move our chamber's bills off the floor by crossover day. So we're going to be working in the evening sometimes in Senate State Affairs. I schedule an extra meeting so we can clear all our bills out of there. And we have some that are going to be of pretty important discussion. A good friend, Representative Overweg, mentioned 1052, which is a House bill, and that's been assigned to my committee. We also have Senate Bill 49, which is somewhat similar to that. And I brought another bill, Senate Bill 198, which is an amended bill to address eminent domain issues, which in my view, 198 is the only eminent domain bill. The other ones are designed to kill a project.
Tell people what 1052 is.
1052 would take eminent domain off the table if you're building a carbon pipeline. Yeah. And 49 is similar. It also includes hydrogen pipelines and would restrict the use of eminent domain for anything that has a tax credit attached to it.
Yeah. So I heard a little bit of testimony in the House when I was there where eminent domain was brought up, and you can hear people are kind of talking about it in the hallways and in the lobby. And this is a big conversation because so many people were primaried on the legislation from last year. Do you feel optimistic, both of you, that you can come to a, for lack of a better word, better solution than lawmakers came to last year? And maybe Representative Overweg, will let you answer that question first.
Well, you know, we live in a great country and a great state, and you know what I personally thought what we decided last year the legislation was wrong, and you know the people of the state overwhelmingly thought the same way, you know, when they killed 201, and so yeah, I think we can do a better job. I think property rights are one of the most basic rights that we're given. And it's important, and I've always said those of us in the House and the Senate who have actually purchased a piece of ground, farm ground, and have worked it with our hands to pay for it, we have a way different idea than what someone who's never done that. Ground is precious, and property is precious. Not only ground, but all property. So yeah, I think we can come to a better conclusion. Things are going to move different with President Trump. We're seeing some of the Green Deal money go away already, and I'm telling you that I firmly believe, Lori, that if the government money goes away, these companies go away immediately.
Leader Melhoff, what would you add to that, or even contradict with it? It's all right that we don't all agree on every single point in here. That's part of the process, right?
Absolutely, and I would agree with Representative Overweg. You know, I would like to see some of the Green New Deal stuff go away, and I don't like it. I hate the whole pipeline discussion probably more than any other issue that we deal with, but it's still an important discussion to have, and comes a time you have to be a statesman rather than a politician, and the policies that prompted Summit Carbon Solutions to come to South Dakota are not decisions we get to make in the South Dakota legislature. Those are decisions that we have to react to when they're made in Washington, D.C. And I think it's important that we react in a very measured way, that we don't create a bunch of unintended consequences as a result. And I think Senate Bill 201, we talked about that a little bit. I was a yes vote on that. I've never disavowed that vote. I think it was a very misunderstood bill. It primarily offered benefits to landowners and to counties, and I think one day the folks who worked to defeat it may regret what they did.
Lawmakers get another chance this year to talk to their constituents and figure out what's next. We're going to wrap up for today, but you're both welcome back in the days ahead to have more conversations. Senator Jim Melhoff and Representative Marty Overweg, representing leadership from the Republican caucus in Pierre. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you, Lori. It was fun.
Yeah.
Love to come back anytime.
Good times, Lori. Thank you for the opportunity.
Up next, leadership goals and visions from South Dakota Democrats. This is In the Moment State House.
Thank you for your support of SDPB. Your support means access to government, resources for educators, coverage of high school championships, and storytelling that unites South Dakota. Now is the time to use your voice in support of SDPB. Contact your legislators and tell them why SDPB is important to you. More information is available at sdpbfriends.org/funding. And thank you for your support of SDPB.
Program funding by the South Dakota Community Foundation. Thinking about how you can leave a legacy for causes that you care about? Gift planning helps you meet your financial goals and support local nonprofits. More at sdcfgift.org.
A man in prison joins a theater group. An intelligent robot shipwrecks on a deserted island. And a girl with magic tries to find her place in Oz. The Oscars are fast approaching, and we're listening back to some of our conversations with the actors and creators behind this year's Oscar nominees. We also discuss the controversy that may derail the chances of one Best Picture nominee. That's next time on 1A.
Listen Wednesday morning at 10 Central, 9 Mountain on SDPB.
Corporate sponsorship on SDPB means your business appreciates high-quality content and a smart audience. You won't just be heard, you'll be remembered. Go to sdpb.org/friends to learn more about corporate sponsorship.
Welcome to In the Moment State House. I'm Lori Walsh. Now it is time for South Dakota Democrats to outline their priorities ahead of Crossover Day in Pierre. Connecting with us now from SDPB's SDN Communications Studios in the Capitol Building, we have Senate Minority Leader Liz Larson and House Minority Leader Aaron Healy. Senator Larson, welcome back to In the Moment. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Representative Healy, welcome back as well.
Happy to be here.
So, Representative Healy, we'll start with you because we came out of the gate this legislative session with lots of conversations about education, including these education's savings accounts. Now, they have not gone forward, but there are vehicle bills in play still. So, what do you know about the education conversation this year that you think is relevant for our audience, and where do you see it going heading into Crossover Day?
Yeah, well, we have to be honest, first of all. We know that these bills are not going to help public education. It's actually going to take away funds from public education. And obviously, the Democratic caucus, our priority is to ensure that we have enough money for our schools that must be funded and the kids that attend those schools and just need to be taken care of. So it's our priority to not support those we call them voucher bills, but the education savings account bills. Unfortunately, our state can't afford it right now. It's a luxury bill, and it's just something that right now, when we are looking at huge budget cuts, it's incredible that we're even having this conversation in the first place.
Yeah. So putting that aside a little bit, because it has not, found its way forward, perhaps not, the time is not right for it, one might argue. You've been talking about early childhood education and other things that support the public schools, child care as infrastructure for a long time. Do you see progress in that area? And tell me what kind of legislation you might be bringing forward yet this session.
Yeah, we are seeing some progress. It's the first time in, I think, a very long time, if ever, that we saw a child care bill make it out of committee. So 1132, House Bill 1132, is my bill that would basically help strengthen the child care workforce. And what it does specifically is it gives eligibility to child care workers if you are at the 300% federal poverty line or below. We plan to amend that bill tomorrow on the House floor, so you have to be a full-time child care worker. But what that does is it serves as a recruitment and retainment tool to offer a little bit of an incentive for child care workers to come back to the industry who've left. They've left because they can't afford child care themselves. And we need to ensure that we're taking care of those workers because we know that they care about children, about high-quality child care. And if they are able to go back to work, because we know that there's a capacity issue, we know that the rooms are available and empty. So if we can fill those rooms with childcare workers, we can fill those rooms with kids. And we know that accessibility is also an issue, that there aren't enough slots open for children in the state of South Dakota. So hopefully this should solve a few different problems here.
Okay, so we're recording this on a Tuesday, so I will just refer people to sdpb.org throughout the day for updates on Wednesday and beyond. Tell me more. Eligibility for what? What exactly does the bill do?
Oh, great question. I'm sorry if I left that out. So child care assistance. So right now, if you qualify for child care assistance, you have to meet the 209% for federal poverty line and below. I want to say that is roughly 45-ish, give or take, $1,000. So not much for your salary, but basically then you have access to child care assistance. So some money from the state that will help you pay for child care. So we would be helping our child care workers pay for child care. We give them a little bit of a bump because that's the incentive in order to get them back into the industry.
Yeah. So you mentioned this is the first child care bill that's come out of committee in a long time.
In a long time. In my first, I've been here, this is my 7th year now, and we have yet to see a child care bill on the House floor. So it's very exciting. We are talking to a lot of legislators about why this is so important. We're trying to explain kind of the landscape of childcare to them, that it's an accessibility, affordability issue, and also, of course, a workforce issue. It's the workforce behind the workforce. So if we can get more people into our childcare facilities, or any licensed, it's any licensed facility, whether that's in home, in a church, in a group facility, or in like my child goes to MB in Sioux Falls. This can really be one small part of solving a really big problem in our state.
I want to jump to the Senate side for a moment and again talk about something, Senator Larson, that we heard your colleague Senator Smith brought, and that has to do with corrections, and that was successful in moving forward. Tell us a little bit about this idea of the language that we use regarding corrections and incarceration and why it matters.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. You know, I think that we have been so deeply engaged in the conversation about the new prison. And I think all parties are, you know, in agreement that we need one, and then there's just disagreement about how that should happen and where that should happen. But in the meantime, I think that we lose sight of what corrections is really trying to do. And I think Jamie Smith's bill to rename the Department of Corrections, the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, is reminding us of that vision that we should have for our corrections. It's not just about incarcerating people. We have some of the highest incarceration rates in the world, and we have pretty high recidivism rates as well, especially when compared to our neighbors. And we are really wanting to know what to do about that. And so one of the reasons why this was brought in sort of a symbolic way is to just kind of reaffirm the direction that we want our relationship with corrections to be in this state. We don't want to have the highest incarceration rates. We want to see people integrated back into the communities and not come back into the correction system. So I think Jamie's bill, which got unanimous support on the floor of the Senate and in committee, reflects that movement.
Yeah, I want to get back to the prison in a minute, but first, Senator Larson, other legislation that you might bring, including about PFAS and AI. Tell me some of the legislation that you're hoping might point to the future.
Sure. Well, we did have a summer study this summer on AI and children's access to the internet. And while we focused more on the access to the internet piece, we still don't have any regulations on artificial intelligence. And we know that this is a really growing field, and whenever we see legislation on this, it's going to be growing and changing a lot over the next decade or so. So last year I brought the first piece of legislation to deal with artificial intelligence, just a very small piece of it, and I'm bringing that again this year. And what it does is it's a piece of legislation that requires a disclosure to be printed on any type of AI-generated content that is produced prior to an election about an election candidate. So if I'm running for office and I produce some, AI-generated visual about you, I have to disclose that on that visual. Or if it's an piece of audio, I would have to disclose that in the audio. So it's basically just saying, the voters have the right to be able to trust the information that they receive and trust that it's not fake. And if it is fake, they should know about it. So that's one bill that I will be bringing again. And hopefully it will also have some early definitions of AI and what that is. And that would be the first definitions of AI in our code as well.
Yeah.
The other one that I'm planning on bringing is to require a disclosure on firefighting turnout gear for the presence of PFAS. So PFAS is an acronym. I cannot pronounce the full name of the acronym, but they are known as forever chemicals, and they are present in firefighting turnout gear. So that's the gear, the protective gear that firefighters wear when they're going in to fight fires. And firefighters have a much higher incidence of cancer at an earlier age than the regular population. Cancer is the #1 cause of, firefighter-related deaths, like on the job illness and deaths. And so one of the factors in that, there's several factors in that. Some of it is smoke inhalation. Some of it is some of the foam that they use to fight fires. But some of it is also the turnout gear or their gear. And slowly, companies are starting to make turnout gear for firefighters that does not contain PFAS. And what I'm saying in this bill is we need to require that the the firefighting gear that contains PFAS is labeled as such. Many of these pieces of gear last for decades, and they're maybe handed down to different smaller fire departments. And it just allows people to manage that transition more easily and get rid of the PFAS gear first as the new gear comes onto the market.
Yeah. Representative Healy, is there other legislation that maybe has gone under the radar for folks that you want to elevate, something that you're bringing, something one of your colleagues is bringing in the House yet?
Yeah, instead of focusing on legislation that Democrats are bringing, I do think that something that the public needs to know about are a lot of the voting registration bills that we have been seeing in the House that have been passing through. And it is concerning how many bills we have that are redefining what it means to be a South Dakota registered voter. We are changing there's a bill to change the registration timeline, so you have to be a citizen for 30 days before you are eligible to vote. And we're just making it more difficult for people in the state who've just come here, maybe students, maybe immigrants even. We're making it harder for people to vote. And if we want to be a true democracy, we should be making it easier for people to vote. So just something of concern that has been coming out a lot of committee lately and through the House that the Senate will be seeing here pretty soon.
Thank you for that. Let's discuss the prison. Our Republican leaders were here just a few moments before you arrived, and there isn't a great consensus. There's a lot to discuss. There's a big price tag. There are big concerns about the price tag if you delay. Tell me a little bit, and we'll start with you, Senator Larson, about how your caucus is talking about the prison, because the Democrats and what side you're going to be on certain pieces of legislation could be very consequential in the days ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, kind of to repeat myself a bit, I think the Democratic caucus is united on the idea that something needs to be done about the prison. Doing nothing is not an option. The Hill, our penitentiary is so overcrowded, it's dangerous to correctional officers, it's dangerous to inmates, it's dangerous to everybody. So we all are in complete agreement of that. I think that there's also somewhat agreement on the paying for the prison side, that at least a portion of it needs to be financed. The $182 million that would be sort of this one-time funds where we're saving in advance is just not a workable way to pay for this kind of really, really high-ticket, high-value infrastructure. We just need to be at least financing a portion of it so that taxpayers aren't having to deal with this kind of this area being tied up with so much money and for so long. So I do think that we need to start talking about different financing options.
Yeah. Representative Healy, what would you add about the prison from the House side? Anything to that?
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. I keep saying our two priorities: one, the safety of the people, the inhabitants, the people who live there, and the people who go to work there every single day. It's incredibly important. As Senator Larson just mentioned, the current situation is not great. It's not that safe. We need to ensure that those folks can be kept safe. Two, it's been mentioned a few times, we really need to ensure that people are being taken care of, that they're getting educated, that they are being rehabilitated. And again, that's not happening in our current situation because of how the prison is laid out and the fact that there are people who are in middle security or minimum security who can't do those programs because of where they're located right now currently in the system. And they're basically in the facility in a higher security level. And that we know that this new prison would fix that problem. But I am in complete agreement, and so is my caucus, with Senator Larson in the Senate, that we need to ensure that we are good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and that we are coming up with the best solution for South Dakotans that is going to be in the future, we're not going to look back on it and think that we made a mistake.
I know this is a little bit of a look into your crystal ball, but do you think that a resolution will come out of this session? Do you anticipate a summer study? Do you think it will be postponed? What's the tone right now for solving the problem?
That's a great question. It is so hard to tell right now, but what I can say is I know that the governor's office is willing to work. When I met with a few of their folks, they said that they are willing to look into funding. So I do think that there is a lot of discussion on the table, and we can address those concerns with our current governor, which is, I think, really fantastic, and he's listening. So time will tell. I don't have an answer for you today. I'm hoping we can figure it out this year because I think it's absolutely necessary that we keep moving. The longer we wait on this issue, the more expensive it will be.
Yeah. Meanwhile, people's safety is at risk, and
Correct.
that is not for
Correct.
nothing. That is it is happening right now for those state employees and for the people who are living in the prison and the visitors. All right, let's talk about the One Stop South Dakota. When we talk about expenditures, are you uncomfortable with some of the reporting that you've seen about the rent on some of these state facilities? Does that need to be addressed by legislators, or is this just a look at how much it's going to cost to do business as state government in the future? Senator Larson, any thoughts on that you wanted to get in?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that particular issue hasn't come across any of my committees or on the Senate floor yet. But of course, I've heard a lot of buzz about it. And I think that certainly it's something that needs to be investigated. And I know the Appropriations Committee went out there. Governor's been out there, I believe, and kind of investigating the issue and trying to come up with solutions on how to tackle whatever is going on there and to kind of unpack what is going on there and then to make some next steps that are, based on fact and whatnot. So, it's another one of those things, a bit like the prison, in that we are far down this road, and it's unclear if we got there through means that everybody agrees on. But this is where we are, and we do need to look at the future and moving forward with it. Yeah. So I look forward to that debate, but I haven't had it yet on the Senate side.
Yeah. Representative Healy, let's wrap up with either anything about that or anything else that you would like to close with today.
Yeah, I'm happy to address One Stop. I agree. I think we need to do something about it. I think retroactively, there's not much we can do. We heard a bill on the House floor, I believe the number was 1205, on, I believe, Thursday or Friday. And what that bill did was basically would give the legislature authority to review leases over a certain amount of years and over a certain amount of money. And then it would also retroactively allow us to go back and look at specific leases that the state already has in existence. That section of the bill gave me heartburn because I think I'm pretty sure that's unconstitutional from what I've been hearing from respected and trustworthy lobbyists here in our state capitol. And then also I think the bill gave a little too much authority to the legislature. We do need to ensure that when we are, again, spending our taxpayer dollars, that we are spending it wisely. And we do need to have those checks and balances and hold accountability to all of the different levels of government. What that answer is, I don't know, but what I can tell you is there is a Senate bill that is currently in appropriations, and they are working out a specific plan for moving forward. And I look forward to seeing what their solution is, because Democrats do support accountability and transparency. Unfortunately, the bill we heard on the floor that we could not support was just not the answer.
Yeah. Senator Liz Larson and Representative Aaron Healy outlining priorities for Democrats ahead of Crossover Day on February 25th in Pierre. Leader Larson, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Leader Healy, thank you as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is our show for today. We hope that it served you. For ongoing coverage, breaking news, and updates, go online at sdpb.org/news. Plus, find committee hearings and gavel-to-gavel floor debate coverage on sd.net. That's a service of SDPB. In the Moment State House is produced by Ari Youngeman and Ellen Kester. I'm Lori Walsh from all of us here at SDPB. Thank you for watching.
I'm Carl Gerke, and this evening on Jazz Nightly, we'll hear the latest from a few jazz greats who first emerged in the 1970s, including saxophonist T.K. Blue, drummer Peter Erskine, guitarist Mike Stern, and tenor saxophonist Scott Hamilton. Plus, we'll hear saxophonist David Murray, who came up through the free jazz scene of the 1970s. Today is his 70th birthday. It all begins at 8 Central, 7 Mountain.
When I'm writing, it's a feeling that it's almost out of body. I have no concept of time or space. I'm just rolling.
Today, I am riding with Donnie Seal Sr.
We're going to ride from St. Louis to Chicago.
After my surgery, it was not something I would even dream of.
I've had some medical issues, and biking has turned it around.
It's going to be a tough 4 days, man.
Let's do it.
Independent Lens, Monday, 9, 8 Mountain on SDPB TV.
Corporate sponsorship on SDPB means your business appreciates high-quality content and a smart audience. Go to sdpb.org/friends to learn more about corporate sponsorship.
This is South Dakota Public Broadcasting.